Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. I'm back, and your 2021 Fantasy Draft Prep starts right here, right now, today. We're going to talk about regression players for this upcoming season. So here we go.
Listen up. It's time for the Fantasy Maverick podcast, starring the guy who's going to help you win that fantasy championship, Jimmy Maverick.
Thank you so much for watching today, and I would just want to remind you to please like, comment, share this video, and of course, hit that subscribe button. And when you hit that little bell, that means you'll get a notification when I post new videos up for your 2021 Fantasy Draft Prep. I very much appreciate your support. Thank you so much, and now on to the video. Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast, my first for 2021, and we are going to be talking about big issues related to the upcoming season, and today we're going to talk about regression players. But before I begin with that, I want to first of all just talk about last year was simultaneously the most frustrating fantasy season for me and the most successful fantasy season for me, as I had won more money than I've ever won before in fantasy football, winning not one but two high-stakes leagues in the National Fantasy Football Players Championship. So that was pretty awesome. But I got to tell you, man, I wasn't kidding about how frustrating the season was, because I went ahead and after the fact, I looked this up, and basically, here's what happened. Now I say when it comes to fantasy, success in fantasy football, it's 50% the draft, 30% managing your team, and 20% luck. Well, let me tell you, man, luck was not working with me this past season, because in nearly every single league I played in, I either had the most points scored against me or the second most points scored against my team. So even in the team where I was the highest scoring team in the league, this is the league that I had Alvin Kamara and Patrick Mahomes. It was my best league. I didn't win that league. I came in third because I missed the championship game by 3 points. But I scraped in to into the playoffs in fifth place on week 13, because I won my week 13 game and it got me in. I was in seventh place before that with a 6-7 record. That's again, I was the highest scoring team in the league. I had the second most points scored against me. So every week it's like I was going against one of the highest scoring teams in the league. And in this league, we have a weekly bonus where the highest scoring team in the league wins a $10 bonus each week of the season. Even though I was the highest scoring team in the league, did not win a bonus. No bonuses won in 16 weeks. So that's the kind of season it was, man. I'm just looking here. Most points scored against me. Third most points scored against me. Most points scored against me. Third points scored most against me. There was one league where I had the 9th most points scored against me. Okay, so that's the league that I should have done the best in, but it was my lowest scoring team in the upcoming season. It was my least favorite draft. It was the last draft I did. I did 8 drafts this past year. That's a lot. I'm not going to do that many this year. But then in my friends' leagues, number 2, number 1, number 2 in points scored against. So it's no wonder that I struggled. But I got the 2 high-stakes championships. I won some serious money, and I decided to do some upgrades. So you can see up here, man, I got some nice stuff. I got myself a Mahomes jersey. I got myself a Kittle jersey. That one's signed. Very nice. I updid my space a little bit. I got some of my collectibles over here. I'm going to be parading those out. I collect old toys and stuff like that. These are, got myself some Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica stuff there. Total nerd stuff. But it's fun, and I have fun with it. And so it was nice to be able to do this sort of an upgrade this year. And we are going to be talking about how to build yourself another championship caliber fantasy team. And really, my leagues, every single one of those teams was competitive, but I just got outscored. I mean, it was tough. I mean, I've never had situations where I score like over 160 points in a given fantasy week and lose. I mean, that happened to me multiple times this season, just nuts. But that is behind us now. This year, it's all upside, man. And we're going to start today. We're going to talk about regression players. Okay, now, what is a regression player? Well, first of all, I just got to say, man, These players that I'm going to talk about in the podcast today are all excellent. They had an outstanding season, and you got to give kudos to them. I got to give them a little bell there because they are awesome. That was a great, incredible season. But what we're talking about this year is, are they going to be able to repeat? And that's the thing, man. I don't think that they are going to be able to repeat what they did in 2020. And so we'll go into that. But let's just go back to last season. I want to talk about the players that I tagged with the regression tag last year. And in my app, which is My Perfect Fantasy Draft, that is the tool we use to draft an excellent team. It really works very well. But I decided to create last year, I decided to create the regression tag and assign it to players. But I had to have specific criteria as to what qualifies as a regression player. And so I got 3 criteria. And the first one is they're coming off an NFL record-setting season. Okay? So if they've done something that hardly anyone or no one has ever done before in the league, okay, they're probably not going to repeat that, right? So you hit them with a regression tag. The second one is, have they had a career season on a contract year? And normally there's a ton of these players. This year, I don't know what was going on, man. Contract year players sucked. They were terrible. There's only a few names, and most of the guys that I'm hitting with this tag for this year are late round players that you picked up after round 8 or 9. None of the early round contract players came through, which is very unusual. I don't see that as something that we can portend for the future. I don't know why it happened, but I'm still very big on contract year players, okay? But I like them on contract years, and I tend to not like them on the year after their contract year. So anyway, that's my personal preference. And then the third criteria is, have they had an excessive number of touchdowns relative to what they would normally get, relative to their value, right? That's basically, those are the 3 criteria for regression. So last year, if we look at last year, I had 15 players tagged with the regression tag. Now, just because they get the regression tag doesn't mean that I don't recommend them. It just means that I'm cooler on them than some other players. And this list of 15, 2 players were still recommended. Basically, what the regression tag does is it subtracts 2 stars from their outlook score. So they can have up to 5 stars in their outlook score. But if they get at least 3 stars, they're a recommended player. Okay, and so the 2 players that were still recommended despite the regression tag were Derrick Henry, who was coming off of a 2,000-yard season, all right, and Aaron Jones, who had I don't know, it was like 20. I should have written this down. He had like 20 touchdowns in 2020 or something like that. He had a lot of touchdowns, right? So I was like, he's going to regress on the touchdowns. And really, but those guys were still 3-star players, and so they were both still recommended. And they both did well. They both did very well. And so that's great. But if you look at the rest of this list, most everybody else sucked, all right? And that's the only way to put it. So first of all, we have Christian McCaffrey. We have Michael Thomas. We have Lamar Jackson. We have Amari Cooper, Mark Andrews, Mark Ingram, Dak Prescott, Devontae Parker, Josh Allen, Jared Cook, Austin Hooper, Dallas Goedert, and Ryan Tannehill. That was my 15 regression players. And basically, with the exception of Josh Allen, first of all, was the big miss on my part. Josh Allen had an incredible season. And the reason why he was hit with that regression tag is because he scored 10 rushing touchdowns in 2019. I'm like, there's no way he's going to do that again. He's not going to make nearly as many touchdowns. So he got 8 this year. So, all right, fine. He's really good. He was my big miss, right? Tannehill had a good season, and Amari Cooper, worth the pick. He was worth the pick, all right, despite all the troubles that Dallas had. So, when I look at this list, I'm like, you know what? That's pretty good. If I only missed on basically 2 or 3 out of 15, that's pretty good. So, like I said, I think the criteria works. And so now we're going to need to look at, so let's look forward. Who are the players that are going to fit into this regression criteria for 2021? And so the first criteria, again, coming off an NFL record-setting season. So we've got several names on this list, and I'm going to go over them right now. So the first one, of course, Travis Kelsey, who just had an outstanding record-setting season, right? I mean, he broke the single-season receiving yards record for a tight end. He had 1,416 yards and 11 touchdowns. Absolutely outstanding. Now, because he did this, I mean, again, it was really a down year for receivers in general, and the fact that Travis Kelsey was, I think he ended up second overall for receiving yards. Very unusual. And of course, he's an outstanding player. But he's now over 30. And 2 years ago in 2018, he did the same thing. He broke the receiving record for tight end. Now, it was only for a few hours because Travis Kittle came in later in that afternoon and broke his record right after it. But the season after, which was the 2019 season, he really fell back. He was definitely a regression tag character from 2018 to 2019, and it happened, man. His touchdowns, he went down to like 6 touchdowns, this is just something that you got to think about. He's very much on the high end of just about every scale you can think of. Can he maintain that? I mean, certainly he's still got Patrick Mahomes. It's still like one of the best offenses in the NFL, but he's over 30 now. And I am guessing that he is going to be the second receiver taken off the board, probably as a late first-round pick. That's really, really expensive. So again, Kelsey's going to have the regression tag, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to recommend him. That's what it comes down to. Now, the next guy, a guy who was on the regression tag last year, I'm giving to him again this year, but I'm still probably going to recommend him, man. Derrick Henry, 2,000 rushing yards for the second consecutive season. That is absolutely outstanding. He is a lock. I think he's a lock as a top 3 player. I think he's going to be top 3. And with the volume he gets, how could you not want to take somebody that's going to get 375 touches? I mean, it's just like, it's nuts. And the fact that guy gets stronger as the season goes by, just absolutely, he's a beast. He is just an absolute beast. But my concern about this is, first of all, he still is not involved in the passing game. Virtually no passes caught during the course of the year. And so when game script goes negative, he disappears. And if you look at his worst games, he had 5 bad games last year. What was the common theme? Basically, they lost every game. So it was a game they were losing. They went into negative game script. Tannehill starts passing the ball more. Derrick Henry disappears. And that's what you got to expect. That's the risk with him. And so obviously, Tennessee, they were 11-5 team last year. They've been very good. But let's say they go down to an 8-8 team, right? Let's say they go down to 8-8 this year. That's a risk, man. That's a big risk. And as a top 3 pick, boy, I got to say, it makes me sweat. I'm still going to recommend him. I mean, sure, if I've got like a 3rd or 4th pick and Derrick Henry's on the board when it gets to me, I don't see how I'm going to pass him up. But, it's just something to consider. He's still going to be good, but he is going to have this regression tag on him this year. Next 2 guys are rookies. Outstanding rookies this year, man. Wow. And the first one, Justin Jefferson of Minnesota. And he broke Anquan Bolden's receiving rookie record with 88 catches, 1,400 yards. That is unbelievable efficiency. 7 touchdowns. Bolden in his rookie year got 1,377 yards on 101 catches. So, again, Jefferson, absolutely outstanding player for last year. Kudos to whoever took him, whoever drafted him. He was obviously the one rookie receiver you wanted to get. I didn't take any rookie receivers in any of my drafts, so I didn't really get any of those guys. But really, there were so many, and only 3 of them actually ended up being fantasy relevant, right? You got Jefferson, you had Lamb, and you had Higgins. Those are the 3 guys that actually ended up with the top 36 performance. But Justin Jefferson, I think he was 6th overall. But here's my concerns, man. First of all, that was incredible season. My biggest concern with Minnesota is the retirement of Gary Kubiak, their offensive coordinator, and we know that Kubiak is a offensive genius, and he is so good with the offense. But now that he's gone, man, I am very, very concerned about the entire passing offense with Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, and everyone else. So again, that's a big risk for regression. We also have to look at what happened with Anquan Bolden in his sophomore year, man. Sophomore slump. I mean, when you kiss the sky like Justin Jefferson has. Expectations are so high. Again, he's going to be a second-round pick, probably a middle second-round pick, top probably 6 to 8 wide receiver, 6th to 8th wide receiver coming off the board. In Anquan Bolden's sophomore season, 623 yards and 1 touchdown. So I'm not saying that that's what Justin Jefferson's going to do, but I'm saying that's the risk. That's the risk. You lose your offensive coordinator. You're coming off an NFL rookie record-setting season. There's nowhere to go but down. There's nothing but downside there. And so while it would certainly be unbelievable to see him repeat and do another 1,400 yards and 7 or 8 touchdowns, I don't think it's going to happen, man. I don't think it's going to happen with this offense. I think they're going to regress. The other rookie player, the last rookie player who broke a record, Justin Herbert, quarterback for Los Angeles Chargers, started week 2, never looked back, ended up as the QB9 on the season, scoring an NFL rookie record 31 touchdowns, and he broke Baker Mayfield's record from 2018 when he got 27 touchdowns. Of course, I don't think Baker did as many. I think Baker didn't start till game 4, so didn't have quite as many games, but still, what an outstanding performance and really excellent. Very bright future in store for him and the team. I think they did, great draft selection. But this next year, what do you got? You got a new head coach. You got a new offensive coordinator and a new coaching system. You got the burden of high expectations heading into year 2. He is going to be a top 10 selection for the 2021 draft. I think I'm going to have to stay away, man. I think I'm going to be looking elsewhere for my quarterbacks. It's just a very high water mark on a rookie season. Regression risk is very high. Okay, so the next category for regression are the players that had a career season on a contract year. And usually there's lots of players that I like to talk to you about here that get that. It was not the case this year. 3, oh man, just like I said, a terrible season for contract year players. I don't believe that's a trend. Contract year players are going to be just fine. They're still going to be scored very well in my app. But there was 3 that had career seasons. The first one, Will Fuller, Houston Texans. This is not surprising given that he was, the lead receiver, and you had DeAndre Hopkins leaving. So before suffering a season-ending injury in week 2, Fuller was on pace for over 70 catches, over 1,100 yards receiving. He did set a career high for catches with 53, 879 yards, and 8 touchdowns in the games that he played in. And that's always been the risk with Will Fuller, right? When he plays, especially playing with Deshaun Watson, you can bank on him to be productive, but it's just how many games are you going to get out of him? And that's the big risk, So now he's had this record-setting season. We'll see what kind of deal he gets. I'm thinking it'll be a good deal, but he's not going to get wide receiver 1 numbers. He's not going to get that sort of a contract. But he's a guy that I would stay away from in general in season long anyway because of his injury history. We also have Curtis Samuel, Carolina Panthers, who he started slow, but he ended the season with 77 catches for 851 yards. Really great season, great midseason pickup because nobody drafted him. He was like he was like a 14th, 15th round draft pick, so maybe you picked him up at the end of your draft. But a couple of issues with him. First of all, it's unclear if he's going to stay on the team. They already have 2 good receivers. Can they really afford to pay him? And that's another thing. Maybe that's another reason why these contract players didn't do so good, is because we've got the whole issues this year with the cap numbers going down as compared to last year. That's unprecedented. There's going to be a really tight squeeze on a lot of rosters, and we already saw. With J.J. Watt getting released, we're going to see a lot of that. A lot of these established veterans with very expensive contracts are going to get jettisoned because they just can't afford it. And then I think you're going to also see that these contract year players are not going to get like the kind of numbers that you would see in a normal year. We're not going to see, Galladay or Ridley end up with huge payouts this year, just because there's not the cap space that's available. And so that's another podcast we'll talk about later. But I think that's part of the reason why maybe these contract players didn't do so well, because they knew that the payout wasn't going to be as good as they thought it was. But anyway, Curtis Samuel, it's not like he's going to be like a high round draft pick anyway, but with these changes, I'm not sure that, your expectation should be so high with him. So anyway, we'll see where he ends up on the draft board. The other one was another guy who I was really interested in preseason, and then he got injured during practice, and so he kind of fell off my radar, but he came through in a way I thought he was going to. Corey Davis of the Tennessee Titans bounced back nicely from a horrible season last year. But he, let's see here, what did he end up with? He ended up with 65 receptions for 984 yards and 5 touchdowns. The yards and touchdowns were career bests. So I am guessing he is going to get retained by the Titans. And so even though it's really good, I think he's in a good position. He's in a good space to get decent volume, good flex value player here. I think he's going to be bid up too high on the draft board. We'll have to see where he ends up. I haven't really looked too closely into that and where he's going. But again, these 3 guys, Fuller, Samuel, and Davis, all fit the regression tag for career seasons on a contract year. So be careful with all those guys. And the final category is players who scored an excessive number of touchdowns relative to their volume, relative to their career averages, where these things are going to pull back. And of course, when you're talking about touchdowns, are a very valuable part of how your player does. Travis Kelsey in 2019, coming off that career season, he was a huge disappointment to anyone who had him, because he wasn't getting the touchdowns. He didn't even get a touchdown until like week 8 or 9. And so those first like 7 or 8 weeks, you're getting brutalized each week, because, this guy you drafted expecting him to get you 20 points a week was only getting you like 10 or 11 points because there was no touchdowns there. It's a super important part of an overall player's performance. And usually when the touchdowns plunge, so does the player's rankings and value. It didn't happen with, it didn't happen with Josh Allen, but of course he still got 8 rushing touchdowns. But anyway, let's go over it. So the players that fit this criteria would be, first one, Aaron Rodgers, who tossed an outrageous 48 touchdowns on this MVP season. He totally deserved it. Kudos to you, Aaron Rodgers. You did great. Hey. All right, so someone just came in. So anyway, so back to Aaron Rodgers, right? Now, clearly, Rodgers, fantastic season, did great. But if you look at like how he's been doing with touchdowns over the past few years, I'm estimating that he is going to regress to probably about 35 or 36 touchdowns in 2021. That is a huge loss of fantasy value, going from 48 to 35 touchdowns, passing touchdowns, especially if you're the kind of team, the kind of league that gives you 6 points per passing touchdown. So like Lamar Jackson in 2020, who I was saying was a massive regression candidate, and he delivered on that. The touchdown rate he achieved, which was 12.9% touchdown reception rate. So 12.9% of his passing receptions were touchdowns. That is an outrageously high number. it's going to regress. That's going to negatively impact not only him, but all his receivers for next year too. And they're also on this list. So that's important to know because I do have both Davonte Adams, who got 18 touchdowns this year, and Robert Tonyan, who got 11 touchdowns on only 52 receptions. Okay, so all these guys, very dangerous players to draft next year. Davonte Adams clearly going to be the number one wide receiver taken. I would absolutely stay away from him because there's no way he's going to do 18 again. I mean, he's going to fall down to back. He's usually good for 10, 11, 12 touchdowns. But that's a huge loss. You're talking 6 or 7 touchdowns. That's like 40 fantasy points. That's a lot. That makes a big difference. And when I'm looking at fantasy players, I want players with upside. I want players that are going to get me more than what they got last year. It's not going to happen with those guys. So I would strike most of the Green Bay receivers off your list because if Aaron Rodgers goes back to 35 touchdowns, that's going to impact those guys as well. So next guy, Alvin Kamara, who ended up with 21 touchdowns, 16 rushing, including the 6 he got on Christmas Day, plus 5 receiving. But, a big concern with Alvin Kamara, man, is just the change in quarterbacks. It's not going to be Drew Brees next year, most likely. So it's going to go to Taysom Hill. And we want to look at what was Kamara's performance when Taysom Hill was the quarterback. And you got Taysom Hill vulturing goal line points. You've got Taysom Hill not throwing the ball as much. His usage plunged. Taysom vultured 2 goal line touchdowns, 26 rush attempts during those 4 weeks. That is a huge negative risk on Kamara, and Kamara is going to be a top 3 guy. And I'm not sure I'm going to be able to recommend him. If it is Taysom Hill, it's going to be the quarterback. So that's something to consider when you're looking at players. So those are, 2 huge names are going to have regression tags on them next year, but I'd stay away from those guys. Who else? Oh, yeah, Adam Thielen. Let's go back, right? We already talked about Justin Jefferson. Adam Thielen got 14 touchdowns on only 74 catches. That is awesome, right? That's awesome. It's not going to happen again. It's not going to happen, especially because they lost Kubiak as their offensive coordinator. Thielen is absolutely stay away. He's over age 30 now, too, which is another big negative for me. I'm a total ageist when it comes to football players, and for me, I don't like to take any receiver over age 30. Talk to me about, why am I drawing a blank on his name? Total brain fart right now. Oh, Julio Jones. Talk to me about Julio Jones, man, and what he did last year. I took him in one of my leagues, and, man, I regretted it every single day. The guy, it was his year 31 season. This is what happens, man, okay? So watch out. And then we also have, Jimmy Graham somehow on my list again. 8 touchdowns on only 50 catches. So it made him look better than he is. He did that in Seattle, too. I don't know what his deal is, but he does that. Again, Jimmy Graham, not a guy you want to own next year. And likewise, the last one, Jonnu Smith, who was on a contract year, did have career highs in targets, receptions, yards, and touchdowns, but I'm putting him on this list because he got 8 touchdowns on only 41 receptions. Not going to happen again, man. Believe me, it's not. So anyway, expect that to decline. He's a poor choice even as a tight end too. So there you go. So there is my list for regression players for 2021. There might be 1 or 2 more that I might add between now and when the season starts, but you will see it because I mark them with this regression tag icon next to their name. And again, it negatively impacts their outlook. That negatively impacts their VORC score, which pushes them down the list. So other players are more favorable. That's how my draft tool works. And but really, man, I'm serious. With all these guys, I can't really see recommending taking them. There's going to be better options, better upside options available for you for these players for the upcoming season. So there you go. So that is my first podcast for 2021. So I'm going to be doing these probably once a week. And I think next week what we're going to be talking about is coaching changes and how that's going to impact players on those respective teams. So we've already got coaching changes on a couple of these regression players. it's an issue. So you definitely want to stay tuned for that. So thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. And I hope you like the new background, the new set. Please leave me a message if you have any questions. And love to hear from you guys. And otherwise, I will be back next week. So thank you very much and have a great day.